Hello and welcome. Our next speaker really does encapsulate beauty, wisdom, compassion and strength. It's my great pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, talking about rejoicing in life, survival and reimagining purpose. In this session, Gill Hicks will recount her personal story of survival against the odds, sharing her insights on what she describes as life after death. Gill is an artist, author, musician, and award-winning director and producer. She became an internationally renowned advocate for peace and countering violent extremism after she was left severely and permanently injured in the suicide bomber attacks on London's transport network in July 2005, in which 52 people died. At the time, Gill was a respected figure in architecture and design in London, on her way to work on the Underground. Her 2021 debut performance at the Adelaide Fringe, Still Alive and Kicking, took out the Edinburgh Fringe Award. Gill will challenge us to rethink our own lives and roles within our communities, encouraging us to find meaning and joy in our daily actions. Her insights will inspire us to reimagine how we can contribute to the common good, fostering a sense of hope and faith and unity in our own work within Catholic health and aged care.
I understood just who and what humanity really is when I first saw the ID tag that was given to me when I was admitted to hospital. And it read, "One unknown, estimated female." Those 4 words were my gift. What they told me very clearly was that my life was saved purely because I was a human being. Difference of any kind made no difference to the extraordinary lengths that the rescuers were prepared to go to save my life, to save as many unknowns as they could and putting their own lives at risk. To them, it didn't matter if I was rich or poor, the colour of my skin, whether I was male or female, my sexual orientation, who I voted for, whether I was educated, if I had a faith or no faith at all. Nothing mattered other than I was a precious human life.
Please welcome Gill Hicks to the stage for our opening plenary.
What an honour and what a privilege to be here as your opening speaker. And I must just say, every time I watch that video, I still feel, I guess, a sense of detachment and wonder at how this could actually be, how I could be here, how I could be still here being Gill. I am living in absolute awe of our ability and our capability. I'm also rather excited that I'm balancing here in front of you on prosthetic legs, wearing Doc Marten boots. As I was checking into the hotel last night, there was a lovely chap standing next to me who was from the UK who looked down at my boots and said, "Great docs." And I sort of gave a bit too much information away by saying, "Well, actually, yes, I'm a double amputee." And this poor man looking at me thinking, "I wish I'd never said anything now." I wore these on purpose because I think rejoice and reimagine is perhaps what I would like to say I symbolise. So when I heard about this conference and spoke to Adrian, I was rather excited, thinking, well, this is me. This is who I find great
excitement in being, in rejoicing for what I have back, for actually just even being alive, and for absolutely reimagining what is possible. Part of that, of course, is wearing Doc Marten boots. I balance on the shoulders of absolute giants, and I know many of you in this room will appreciate just what it takes to enable my story, someone like me, to be here today, functioning, wearing lipstick, speaking to you. It is extraordinary. And I do balance on the shoulders of giants, people who refused to ever give up. And I think the thing that's really taken the most from me is just every single time I speak to any one of those giants, where I'm desperate to say, thank you, thank you. I'm always met by the most humble of responses, which is, I was just doing my job. I was just doing my job. Well, what a job that is. And I would say it's far more of a vocation and a calling, and indeed an example to us all when we care and we help each other. Now, this wonderful portrait is hanging in the National Gallery in Canberra, and I was rather sort of perplexed about it being hung in Canberra and wondering, how is this being received? Part of me was hoping that, of course, it would bring up the conversation around ability and disability. And so I went and met the curators and sort of was eagerly asking, how is this being received and what's your feedback? And they said, well, actually, it's a big hit with all the school students. And I said, oh, this is fantastic. So we're having those deep conversations with the youth. This is great. And they said, well, they're not really talking about ability or disability. Sort of overwhelmingly, what they're saying is, oh, how cool that she's wearing Converse. Isn't that interesting that we find our way in? We find our way in. And I kind of liked that suddenly I became invisible for my difference, but rather visible and accepted because of the things that felt normal, the things that felt accepted and appreciated. So for me, I think it's absolutely about gratitude, about living fully and reimagining every step of the way. For the past 19 years, I have done very little except daily pondering of, well, what is it all about? If I've been given a life back, then what is it all about? Why am I here? And I've come to think of life as a sum of all of our experiences. And that has helped me mentally accept all of the spectrum of those experiences. To not harbour hatred or bitterness, or to ask, why me? To accept that actually I am a product of every single experience that has happened along the way. And who am I? Who am I to design those experiences? Because every single pain that I have is a great cue, a reminder that I'm here, that I can feel. And if I can feel, then I'm alive. So I take the joy, and I take the sorrow, and I take the good, and I take the bad, and I say thank you, because that is everything that I am today. I had to reimagine my life quite early on. I was born and raised in lovely Adelaide in South Australia. And for any of you that know Adelaide or have been to South Australia, one of the things that we've really sort of been quite proud of is that it's quite a boring place. And that's been good, because then you don't expect too much to happen to you. My parents died a year apart from each other, and I was 17 and then 18 when my mother died. And I was with my mum when she died, and I will never forget her hand just slipping out of mine and the impact of that moment. I looked at this beautiful woman's body who was only 53 years old, and I thought, there has to be more. There has to be more. This wonderful person has done everything. She's worked hard, she's done everything. There has to be more. And I sort of had an understanding that if I stayed in Adelaide, then I would probably get married, have a golden Labrador, and not really do anything out of my comfort zone. Now, whilst that's, of course, the hope of many, at that time for me, change was an exceptional catalyst to do something extraordinary. Now, I'd never left South Australia. I'd never been on an aeroplane before. But I love that idea of looking back at, 18-year-old Gill and that wonder of naivety, of what you don't know, you don't know. And actually how enabling that is, because it gives you a sense of bravado and courage. Courage when you don't even actually know that you need to have courage. And I remember going to Adelaide Airport, and I was didn't even research how long the flight would be from Adelaide to London. And I was horrified that people were turning up in their tracksuits. And I was dressed immaculately, thinking, well, I'm going to London. And of course, in London, everyone's going to speak like this, and it's going to be the Queen's English, and I'll probably be met at the plane and offered a career. How marvellous. I need to tell you it didn't end up like that, but I was taken to the airport by a family friend, a very wealthy family friend. And I remember her giving me an envelope. And she said to me, quite explicit instructions, she just said, open this when you get into your seat on the plane. So I thought, oh, fantastic. Whew. There's going to be a whole wad of money in there. And so I got in, got my seatbelt on, opened the envelope, and nothing in there except these two words: trust yourself. Now, as an 18-year-old, I didn't realise that trust yourself was probably the most valuable piece of advice that I could ever be given. Because again, what you don't know, you don't know. Of course I trusted myself. I didn't know I had to do anything differently. But at the time, I remember thinking, okay, there has to be something in this. And I've come back to those two words over and over and over again throughout my life. So actually, it was the most invaluable advice that I've ever been given. And I needed it, because when I got to London, of course, it's very interesting, the lens you put over something. I was looking for accommodation and somewhere to live, and I couldn't find anything, so I ended up in a share house with 12 other people. And there was no electricity and no hot running water. And I remember writing a letter home to my brother saying, London is amazing. It's everything and more than I thought it would be, because it's teaching me grit. Wow. The lens you put over something determines the experience you take out of it. Now, I'm not too sure I'd want to be staying somewhere without hot running water and electricity now, but at the time, I was ready for that experience and open to whatever was going to unfold. And it was quite extraordinary that grit was giving me a sense of absolute motivation and determination. That I knew if I wanted to get out of a situation that had no hot water and no electricity, then I had to go and make that happen for myself. Extraordinary motivation. Now, of course, what I wasn't prepared for was the etiquette that is in commuter travel in the UK, particularly in London. And that is, of course, on the tube, no one is encouraged to talk to the other, and you're not allowed to look at each other in the eyes. Now, my whole game plan was disintegrating because I was thinking, right, if I get the tube, I'll be able to talk to someone and say, hi, my name's Gill from Adelaide. What do you do? Perhaps I could come to your office with you and, do some work experience. And of course, any time I spoke to anyone, they would just move along and the book would go up further across their face. This was devastating. So I was pounding the streets every single day looking for work. And the only people that started to talk to me were the 10 homeless guys on my everyday route. Now, I'd never seen homelessness at any sort of scale like this before. And one day, one of them just looked up at me, and his name was Kevin, and he said, "You look like you've had a worse day than I have." And I said, "Yeah, it's tough. I can't find a job." And slowly, every day, they started to talk to me, and every day they would say to me, "Good luck today, Gill. Hope you find something." And I felt this buoying on by my new comrades, if you like, this team of 10 people. One day, Kevin said to me, "Look, Gill, we've actually had a little chat with each other and we'd like you to help us." And I said, "Kevin, I don't have any money, I can't help." And he said, No, we've come up with an idea. I said, "Oh, okay." And what I found interesting is their idea is still valid to this day. And they came up with an idea that they would like me to save their money for them. So can you just picture this for a minute? A short, young Aussie girl taking money from the homeless, putting it in my bag every day. It sort of almost must have looked like I was running some strange protection racket. But I managed to have envelopes in my bag with their first names. And every day I would collect their money. At the end of every week, I would tell them how much they had and what they would like done with that money. What they gave me, and I feel emotional talking about it even today, is they gave me my first incredible lesson in humanity and trust. And there would be no way that I would have ever have broken that trust. I could have just walked down a different street and had £600 in my bag at any given day, but I would never break that trust. They also completely informed what I went on to do as a career, and that was to follow an avenue of design. I was desperate to think, how can I help design society where Kevin and the other 9 and all the homeless people had a place? How could I do that? So the impact of that relationship had on the whole trajectory of my life. Now, of course, I took it a little bit too far working for UK Gov at the time, and I became a workaholic. I was that person with self-imposed ideas as a female, as a young female, as someone who wasn't a national Brit, that I needed to work twice as hard as my peers. So I would be the person that was at my desk at 7:30 every morning without fail, and I would leave by 10:30 every single evening. If I could transport back to that version of myself, I would desperately say to her, "Please live fully." Because I never appreciated that when we live fully, we have far more greater connections with humanity. We actually become better employees, far more interesting people, and I can't regain that life that was lost sitting at a desk trying to be equal to my peers when I didn't need to do that at all. There was only one day that I was running late, and as you can imagine, the loop that keeps running in my mind of why was that one day that I was late. Everyone that knew me, when the bombs went off at 10 to 9, there were 4 coordinated bombs across London on July the 7th, 2005. Everyone that knew me thought, well, Jill will be at her desk. She's fine. The one day that I was running late. I've watched the CCTV footage and it's quite chilling because I see myself boarding the same train carriage at exactly the same time as one of the suicide bombers. I've now found out that I was one person removed from that suicide bomber. And rather upsettingly, perhaps I forgot those lessons taught to me about being a human being. Because most people ask me, didn't you see something? Didn't something not feel right? And I say no, because I wasn't looking at anyone in the eyes. I wasn't talking to anyone. I'd become a Londoner. I wish I'd talked to the guy that stood between me and the bomber. He lost his life immediately. His name is Adrian, and I wish I'd had the opportunity to have said, good morning, how are you? Thank you. Adrian is with me always as the reminder of how important it is to stay engaged, to stay connected. And even if we can't utter a word, to make sure that we give an acknowledgement and a smile to our fellow human beings. It was just a draw of a breath, and my life and those around me changed forever. We were plunged into a darkness that was so thick, it was almost tangible, like a dark soup. And my body felt that it was flying through the air and yet hovering down to the ground like a gentle feather. I've often thought about the suicide bomber, a 19-year-old, and the lessons that perhaps he has shown me. And what I've taken from his action is to never presume anything about anyone you don't know. Imagine a different outcome if he'd spoken to me, if he'd spoken to us and saw us as one rather than a division of us and them. Life is in the moments. As I hovered within death, I've now been told that I was gone for 30 minutes without a heartbeat, without a pulse. And in that 30 minutes, it was the amazing offer of a film of my life. And yet there was no beginning, there was no middle point, there was no plot. It was all of this compilation of moments. There I was eating my favourite pasta and tasting the sauce. And then I was laughing at a joke and I was crying at the breakup of that first great love. I could feel the warm sunshine on my face as a child on the beach at Glenelg in South Australia. Life was in the moments. And once I'd understood that that's what it was, then I put my hand up to say, I want to be back and I want to be present, because now I know I'm going to really savour all of these moments, because they might just make my film. In that darkness, those anonymous London commuters became vital lifelines. And in the darkness, we all held our hands out and we all connected in the most incredible, powerful embrace. What changed in this carriage was that survival wasn't about me, it was about us. Survival was about us. And in that darkness, somebody came up with this fantastic idea that we should just do a roll call to keep each other buoyed, to keep each other present. So I used to listen intently for someone called Richard to say, I'm Richard, I'm here, I'm still alive, and that was my cue to say, I'm Jill, I'm here, I'm still alive. And we cared for each other. this was about us. It was an hour that we were there, an hour of incredible uncertainty. None of us knew what had happened. I was still live in shock that this was a deliberate action. None of us knew what had happened, but we were there for each other. Each other mattered. At the end of that hour, they came. And of course, it didn't matter who they were. I was able to feel that I could surrender my body to these incredible people who had entered the carriage to rescue us. Now, I must say that I've managed to seek every single person that was involved in rescue that morning. I needed to say thank you. I needed to look at them and say thank you. They are now who I consider my family. My dearest friend was the first paramedic who entered the scene, and she triaged me. And I still have a little giggle with her to this day, because I remember her vividly putting a tag on me and saying, "Priority 1. And I said to Tracy afterwards, I said, "Gosh, Trace, I didn't know what a priority 1 was, but I remember thinking, this sounds a lot better than a 2 or a 3. Definitely being fast-tracked out of here." What I felt and it was almost like I was a human baton being passed from one rescuer to the next to get me out of the carriage, to get me down the tunnel, to get me up to ground. I felt this extraordinary, unconditional love from each set of hands that touched my body. Unconditional love. I met one of the young police officers who held my hand, and he said to me, "Gill, I was trying to give you some of my life through my hand into your hand." And I said, I felt that. Unconditional love. It still also really gets to me that I was labelled one unknown, estimated female. I think that says everything that needs to be said. And I thought a lot about our individuality, of all of us as incredible individuals who can make such a difference. And yet, as a collective, we are human beings, and how that collective idea saved my life that day. Of course, I would be nothing without the role models who were there for me during my care in hospital. I was in hospital for 6 months. I absolutely loved being in hospital. I was taken to St Thomas's Hospital, and from my window was Big Ben. So I was sort of joyed in anyone asking me, "Oh, what's the time?" And I'd say, "Well, if you look over there, there's Big Ben." Part of my care in hospital, and I must say, I was taken to a place that was run with an extraordinary mandate, and that was a culture of confidence and agency. So each single person, from the cleaner right up to the great professors, were allowed to bring themselves to the job. And that had an extraordinary impact on me. Confidence and agency. I had to sort of deal with a lot of my firsts. Of course, being a double amputee, I had to relearn everything again. So the first time was always the big time. And I remember the nurse looking at me and saying, "Okay, we're going to have to do a shower." Now, I don't know about you, but I loved my showers. The shower was a place where I thought and where I sang. So the idea of looking at what will this be like now that I can't stand up in the shower. And this wonderful nurse, without me saying a word, just read my face. And she said, "Do you know what, Gill? Let's do this together. So in her uniform, she jumped in the shower with me, got absolutely saturated. We giggled as she washed my hair, and I still can hear this wonderful sound of her wet Crocs going through the ward afterwards as I was in my wheelchair, and all the other patients thinking, I want that. I want what they've just had, because it was just this squish, 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 squish. It was absolutely amazing. Of course, confidence also had a big impact when I had my first set of prosthetic legs fitted. Now, I must say, there is always opportunity in adversity. There's always opportunity in adversity. I had the most incredible consultant who came in. He sounded exactly like David Attenborough. So can you imagine David Attenborough coming into your hospital room, and he came in and he said, "Oh, my dear, would you mind just putting your arms out for me? I need to measure you for your first prosthesis." And I thought, okay. So, of course, I asked him, why do I need to put my arms out? And he said, well, we are so perfectly made that we are the height of our arm span. Oh dear, there is opportunity in adversity. I used to be 5 foot. I spent about a half an hour talking to this consultant, and I just said, look, I think we could make something positive out of this terrible situation. And I thought actually that I could be a lot taller than what I used to be. I am thrilled to say that I ended up walking out of hospital at a staggering, towering 5'8", and it was amazing. I couldn't tell anyone that I was terrified, but it didn't matter, did it? Because this was new. And what they managed to give me in allowing me to own some of that change was incredible confidence to take those first steps, because they allowed me to own that change. Extraordinary. I must just say that South Australia actually brought me back down to 5'5". I'm still ahead, but not happy. Life is an honour and a privilege, and I think that that's the baseline that I operate from. Whenever anything goes wrong, when anything goes right, I have absolutely always said that it is an honour and a privilege to even be here and to be breathing, and no matter what happens, making life count and making a difference is what matters to me. Reimagining really started to take place once I was in care, and this real sense of unconditional love. I think for me it was trying to understand, how do I take this and message it out? How do I take these extraordinary learnings to say, this is who we are? When we get over all the noise and all the other things, this is who we are. How do I be the symbol, the reminder? And that's what I spent most of my early days trying to understand. 3 of the 4 bombers came from up north in the UK, and I went to the Leeds community and said to them, here I am, how do we work together? What can we do together? And it was a room a little bit like this, and lots of fantastic people coming up with these incredible ideas. And as a joke, just to sort of soften the room a bit, I said, well, I could always walk from Leeds down to London. No one laughed. So I walked from Leeds down to London, and on that through 22 towns and cities. I said, please, this is not about raising money. This is not about charity. This is about bringing people together. And this is about me saying very clearly, if I'm prepared to do the most difficult thing, then I urge you, please, as we come through your town or your city, come and walk and talk to someone who you believe you might hold a different idea from. There were thousands of conversations. Every night I would be weeping at just the outcome of knowing who we are and having that expectation that what unites us is always far greater than what can divide. It took me 6 months to recover from the walk, so I don't think I'll be doing that again. But I have then looked at, well, how do I rest upon my design background, and how do I start messaging around that? So, for me, absolutely, it's about how you and I make up humanity. How we are each advocates, we are each leaders, we are each role models. And it always sort of gets to me that someone, somewhere, is feeling the effects of something you have said or done. Sometimes we know about that, and sometimes we don't. In reimagining, I've also looked at, well, how can I take a message of me globally without being global in person? So I thought about, imagine if my prosthetic feet could travel the world. And so that is what they do. Now, I've used this image here of Mount Kilimanjaro. Not only I think it's a fantastic idea of symbolising reimagining, but also because for me it represents the greatest of imposter syndrome ever, because in my office I have a certificate that says, "Congratulations, Gill Hicks, for climbing the summit." And I kind of have to say, well, I wasn't there, but my prosthetic feet were. And it started this conversation. So wherever the feet go, whoever is their custodian, a conversation is had about how they came to being and why they are travelling. Here they are recently in Ethiopia. And again, imagine the continuing story of what is told about these two little kids trying on these strange plastic feet and what that meant. The ripple effect of us all. I was working in Karratha, and look, you'd think that I'd be someone that would be absolutely fine being in a confined space on a plane, because I should be able to just take my legs off and put them in the overhead compartment and wonder why everyone's complaining about the legroom, but I can't for health and safety reasons. I was on a small plane from Perth going to Karratha, and I was in a lot of pain. And I remember thinking, really rethinking of, why am I doing this? And perhaps life would be much easier if I went back to being a designer and did what I know and not put myself in these situations. And almost as an answer to that unwritten contract that I signed in the carriage that morning after the bombs, I was given this note by a fellow plane traveller who I didn't know. And it says, "Hello, Gill. This feels a little mad, but I'm winging it. You and I are on this flight together. Your words have spoken to me many times. The stranger beside you can change your life. And so I start conversation on the train and the plane, and I reach out and I welcome those who reach out to me. Often I ponder, what is the pre-work to creating connection? How do we cultivate this, multiply it, amplify it? Peace as a verb, our daily responsibility. My mission, my personal practice is to support connection and belonging. Today, the seat next to me is empty, so I'm connecting with you. Thank you, Gill, for advocating for love and for potential. Thank you for demanding more than tolerance. I wholeheartedly agree with your challenge to see that what unites us is far greater than what can ever divide. The lens of life is this: I see you in me, and I see me in you, and we can transform with love. I hope you enjoy your time in Karratha. It is a place of true spirit. Yours truly, Sarah, the girl in 8A. You can understand why this is normally in a frame, because Sarah, the girl in 8A, has given me that great understanding that sometimes we don't get to hear back, but how important it is to keep doing and to keep true to what our heart is telling us to do and to never give up, because someone somewhere is feeling the effects of something we have said or something we have done. Just to finish today, I had to think a lot about what it is to leave a footprint. When I came back to Australia after 26 years away, it really hit me that I would never again leave an impression on my home soil. And it's wonderful when we hear an acknowledgement or welcome to country, because I get it, I feel it, that the land is important, that the land also speaks to us. And I was desperately looking at how I could mentally start working a new narrative, because I don't want to harbour bitterness, I don't want to harbour disappointment. So my new narrative around a footprint was, well, perhaps a footprint could be something different. Maybe there's a place where it is far greater than just leaving an impression in the soil or the sand. And maybe a footprint is what we leave each other. And maybe that has far more resonance and far greater lasting than anything we could ever leave in the soil. So today I would like to please leave a footprint with you all and wish you an incredible gathering where I know that many footprints will be left with each other. Thank you so much for the honour, for the privilege to be balancing here before you, and I wish you a great conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your footprint, Gill Hicks. And it is indeed our honour and privilege to have you along today. Life is in the moment, as you remind us, and you have given us so many moments to reflect on today. You are indeed a staggering 5'8" in my mind, and there's nothing wrong with 5'5". But please join me when you're heading home on the plane, say hello, and please join me in saying a very big thank you once again to Gill Hicks.